Luminous Avenger X was a very interesting entry, to say the least, and it made me pretty wary going into X2. Would it actually improve on X1's shortcomings? And would it actually do something interesting with this new timeline? Where can they even go from here? Well, they went somewhere, alright. Welcome to Luminous Avenger X2, where all hope comes to die. This game takes place in the same timeline as X1, a little while after the events of that game. It opens up with Copen and Kohaku talking about the current state of the world after their battle with Demerzel, which is peaceful? Okay, I mean, yeah, Copen killed Asimov and stopped the butterfly effect and stuff, but like, the Sumeragi Group was a century-old corporation that ruled the world and oppressed humans, literally wanting to eradicate them. How is that all just gone? Copen just stopped one plan of theirs. It by no means should have shut down the entire company, and even if it did, does that century-old stigma of oppression just not exist anymore? Do adepts just not hate humans now? Surely they'd still be trying to hunt them down, even under the new rule of Kohaku's sister, because yeah, Blade took over. That's like mentioned once and never talked about again. Right off the bat, this felt very lazy to me. Things are just suddenly peaceful now, which begs the question of what the plot of this game could possibly be if not centered around the human versus adept conflict society that Ix set up. Also, Copen mentions this weapon that suddenly appeared in his hands that he calls the blaster rifle, which seems like a mystery, but don't expect too much. It's never brought up again until the last scene of the game. It's pretty much just there to serve as the new melee weapon of the game, or the weapon that Copen made that melee weapon from. Yes, that's a rifle. Yes, the new weapon is a melee weapon. Don't worry about it, we'll get there. Apparently this is also a reference to the protagonist weapon from Blaster Master Zero, another Inti Creates IP that I know nothing about, so I can't really speak on anything past that. As Copen and Kohaku are talking, a wormhole suddenly appears and they're sucked into another world, oh no! They appear before Null, a robot who directs them to the Grave Pillar, a giant tower that holds all knowledge of this world and also is the key to getting back home. There's also a several month time jump between them being sucked into the wormhole and them arriving at the Grave Pillar. No, they don't show any of those months. It is an instant skip, still in the opening cutscene. No, I'm not kidding, this is the actual plot they're going with. Getting transported to this new world out of nowhere that nobody cares about because it has nothing to do with Copen or his world or anything, climb the tower, search for the Guardians of the keys they need to open doors to progress, which of course serve as the bosses of the game, and get home. They try to expand on the lore of this world a little bit, and explain that humans have gone extinct long ago with only robots remaining, who have no free agency. They're assigned a mission upon being manufactured, and their programming prohibits them from doing anything that impedes that mission. These are called workers, and Null is a defect. She never got a mission and was scrapped. So of course this means she can do whatever she wants. She's also not very interesting. They end up meeting a Copen lookalike named Ypsilon that they clash with a few times, who is desperate to defeat Copen in order to prove himself to someone he calls Mother, who he refers to as his partner. I'll save the finale of the story for the end as usual, but I just could not believe what I was seeing with this story setup. This being its own self-contained story, in and of itself, Okay, well, in and of itself, it is actually kind of weird, but if it was a good story, I could forgive it and could like it. But this just does not really make me care about it at all. Although I will say, I do like the setting itself. The giant tower with no organic life to be found in a relatively empty world where the only activity is from some robots who don't even have free will. I found that aspect of the game to be really cool, in all honesty, especially with the kind of macabre death theme being present. It just hammers home that not much remains here. Not even organic life. I will also say that this is the first time in the series to feature an English dub, and it's actually pretty good, surprisingly enough. Aaron Hansen! At the end of the day, the gameplay is what really matters, right? And of course, being a Luminous Avenger game, we have the classic, as good as ever, Copen gameplay. Oh wait, hold on, I'm actually getting some news here. Oh, they changed it. First off, the bullet system is completely gone. And I mean, gone. You can still air dash once. Yes, you get one singular air dash before you need to touch the ground again to reset it. This one aspect alone kills a lot of the enjoyment for me. It was so cool dashing from enemy to enemy as Copen in previous games, but now no matter what, you need to take a short break to touch the ground before zooming into another enemy. I don't think anything highlights this downgrade better than your literal starting EX weapon in this game. In X1, the Anchor Nexus was one of my favorite EX weapons, because it turned your dash into an attack, which would automatically hone in on enemies, and was very fun to use. In X2, they bring this back as your starting EX weapon, which is fucking awesome. But now, with the change to the air dash system, you can only use this once before needing to touch the ground again, instead of being able to chain it to other enemies, which removed a lot of the fun of this weapon for me. You basically just can't combo anymore. Additionally, you can't tag enemies by dashing on the ground anymore. Instead, ground dashes just kind of barrel into enemies and stun them. It can also stun certain bosses if done at the right time. To tag enemies, you have to do it with an air dash, which I'm not opposed to, honestly. The ground dash thing is kind of weird, they didn't really do much with what that turned into, but only being able to tag enemies with air dashes kinda adds some nuance to his gameplay that I can appreciate. The changes don't end there though. Your normal default weapon, which has historically been a ranged gun, is now a purely melee attack. Not like a saber though, with controlled hits or anything. No, it's a saw blade called the Razor Wheel, which Copen made from the mysterious blaster rifle that does contact damage to enemies. Can do a cool little 3-hit combo if you keep pressing the melee button, but you can't move while doing this, which already makes it feel useless, as nothing in Gunvolt is designed around you standing still. The combo ends in a big Razor Wheel that does more damage than the normal one, but again, you can't move while using it, so what's the point? There's an upgrade in the shop, however, that makes this big wheel a projectile, which I would imagine is a bit more fun, but I personally never got that upgrade. There wasn't an achievement for getting all the upgrades like there was in X1, so I didn't bother grinding for them this time around, as the game is already easy enough as is. Another gameplay change that also contributes to this easiness is Copen's special skills. One good change they made is separating his screen nuke skill and healing skill again, thank god, but now the healing skill just doesn't have a cooldown. I'm dead serious, you can spam the shit out of this to your heart's content. I have no clue why they thought this was a good idea, as this makes it literally impossible to die from health loss unless you're trying not to use it. But at least it doesn't trivialize the challenge of those going for score, because using it, just like offensive skills have always done, cashes in your kudos. So if you want to keep them, you better not have to heal. I personally didn't care much about score, but for boss fights I tried not to use the healing at all to just make them more fun and interesting. Speaking of kudos, it is now no longer possible to lose them by getting hit. Yeah, this game completely ditches the different difficulty settings regarding kudos gains and score multipliers. I never really mentioned this in my other Gunvolt videos because I always just opted to play on Fearless, but there have always been 3 different settings. Fearless, where you lose your kudos in 1 hit and has the highest score multiplier, Reckless, where it takes 3 hits to lose your kudos with an average score multiplier, and Gutless, where it's impossible to lose your kudos from getting hit, but has the lowest score multiplier. Yeah, this game is basically just permanent Gutless mode. To me, this seems awful, but that's only on the surface since I didn't really care for score in this game, so I can't really say. Maybe the rank requirements scale nicely with this, and it's still really difficult to get the higher ones in this game. I didn't care enough to find out for myself. The stages themselves, though, are as good as ever. Even though I don't like Copen's gameplay nearly as much here, I think the stages complement it really well. There are quite a few that utilize the Razor Wheel to deal with obstacles, and they feel natural to go through even with Copen's new style. I don't really have any complaints about them, to be honest, and the same goes for the bosses. In fact, the bosses are fucking awesome, and I honestly think they're the best they've been since Gunvolt 1. They have a very similar feel to them, being a bit more simple but more satisfying to learn the patterns of and deal with. They also just have great designs and personalities. Like, just look how fucking cool Dayside is. That design goes so hard. Also, his voice actor absolutely fucking killed it. Holy shit.
Ready to unleash. Armageddon Ray!
Some of these bosses are even related to each other, like Daysite being Brigade's military captain and Autochrome and Vespa being brother and sister, the latter pairing of which they utilize beautifully in the boss refights. Instead of fighting them again separately, there's a completely unique fight in which you go up against both of them at once, and they even combine together for their special attack, which is fucking sick. I really appreciate the boss refights in this game because it does try to shake things up a bit instead of just having you fight the same exact bosses, but again. There's not only the Autochrome and Vespa duel fight, but Brigade has an entirely different fight too. In his original battle, he piloted this huge machine, only coming out of it after it's destroyed at his last health bar segment. And the entire last phase is him going ballistic on you as his special skill. In his refight, the machine is nowhere in sight, and instead the entire fight, known as Brigade Mach 2, is him going ballistic on you, with his special skill this time activating a timer, meaning you have to defeat him and reach the end of the stage afterwards before time runs out. It's really awesome, but unfortunately the other three bosses are exactly the same. I don't really know why they opted to change exactly half of them and leave the other half untouched, but I'll take it. Now, I said the boss designs are cool, and they are, but we have to talk about these special skill cut-ins. I know this is like the 4th game in the series, and they probably want some new shiny graphical upgrades, but not like this. I might be completely alone in this, I have no idea, but this kind of 2D animation has always gotten on my nerves. It's a huge pet peeve of mine, and I don't know how to properly explain why. All I can say is that it just looks like it came out of a bad mobile game ad every single time. I would absolutely prefer the static PNGs over this. I think it's really the idle animations towards the tail end of each cut-in that really get me. It just looks like a fucking Royal Match ad or something. Like, this kind of thing just looks wrong. I have no idea if that's like a common sentiment or not, or if I'm just insane, but I feel very strongly about this. The boss theme, however, is probably the best in the series so far. I'm not kidding, this thing bangs. These bosses also have the same issue with their weaknesses as they did in X1. Most weaknesses will absolutely cripple them and make the fight a joke, which I've never really liked, but it is what it is. Par for the course, unfortunately. And of course, these bosses will give you their weapons when defeated, and I'll be honest, this is probably my least favorite set of weapons. There's the staple charge-up weapon, which is a big fireball, a propeller that gives you some upwards mobility similar to the tornado weapon in X1, neither of which I like because you're basically forced to move upwards when using them, making them feel very awkward. There are boomerangs, which have pretty standard functionality, tag and shoot, cosmic lasers, which only alternate between a cross and an X pattern, and also give you a shield, which I have no idea how that works because it never seems to do any protecting, but does do some extra damage when you dash into enemies with it, I think. There's a slowdown weapon, which just slows down time and freezes enemies you're locked onto, which is pretty cool, honestly. Reminds me of that one from X5. And by far the best one, a fucking minigun. There's no gimmick here, it's just a minigun. It feels a little awkward sometimes because you can't change the direction it fires in. It always just fires straight in the direction you were facing when you started it. And even if you turn around, it won't. It only changes trajectory if you lock onto an enemy, because then it'll target them. And there's also no way to shut it off after you've started it other than completely switching weapons. It's a bit weird, but come on, it's a fucking minigun, it's awesome. I know I've complained a lot about the gameplay and such, but there is one thing this game does absolutely right. Well, mostly right. See, while the gameplay changes make the game not nearly as fun for me, and I think the game is way too easy, that's all in the main game, the normal mode. See, X2, just like its predecessor, features the collectible golden emblems. They serve the same function as they did in that game, but with one added function. Collecting all of these in X2 unlocks a secret door in the final stage, Ultra Kill P rank style, and this door leads to hard mode. Yes, this game features a hard mode. When I first heard about this, I didn't really take it that seriously given how easy the main game is. I kinda just thought I would be playing the game again, but a bit harder. Maybe enemies do more damage, or the bosses have different patterns or something like that. Sure, whatever. But I was in for a rude awakening. See, this game has two modes. The Absolute Breeze mode and Ultra fucking Nightmare mode. There is no in between. Hard mode disables all upgrades, meaning your starting abilities and mechanics are the only ones you can ever have, and it also disables leveling up, meaning your health bar stays at its starting value the entire time. The healing skill is also completely disabled, thank God, and yes, the bosses do, in fact, have different patterns. Each boss even has different weaknesses than they did in the main game, and these weaknesses just do more damage without ever actually crippling them. So hard mode is really more like a fuck you mode, and let me tell you, I love it. It genuinely goes a long way in making the game more enjoyable. I like actually having to learn the boss's patterns and play well to get by. There's just one teeny tiny issue, just one thing that kinda sorta ruins it. I guess making the game harder wasn't enough. They had to make it annoying as well, genuinely frustrating to the player, because God forbid they have fun trying to get better at the game. Nah, they decided what hard mode really needs is a live system. That's right, the main game has no such thing, but hard mode introduces lives. Lose all your lives and you're booted back to the level select screen. I thought we as a society were past this, but I guess not. Because I guess people love having to replay an entire stage just to get another crack at what they're struggling with. The stages themselves are still very easy, by the way, so it's really just more of a time-consuming annoyance to get back to the boss than anything. But man, does it add a totally unnecessary level of dread and stress knowing how close I am to having to start all over every time I die. And that's not fun. Even with the life system though, hard mode overall is a very appreciated addition, and did make things a lot more interesting for me. And speaking of, hard mode isn't actually just the same game but harder, it's also the true ending of the game. Yeah, it contains more story, and the ending you get after defeating the final boss in normal mode is not the canon true ending. So I'm going to start talking about not only hard mode story, but also the rest of the overarching story of the game, so if you want to avoid spoilers, skip to this timestamp right here. In normal mode, the gang reaches the top of the tower and finds the fabled teleporter, except Ypsilon feels a little silly goofy and breaks the thing, so Null sacrifices herself to complete it. RIP I guess, you did nothing, thanks for the teleporter. Before they can use it though, Ypsilon captures Kohaku and brings her to Mother. Upon reaching her, we get the exposition. Turns out that Mother, Ypsilon's partner, is basically the AI that controls everything in this world, but the original human creator, which I just assume is the one who made Mother and the worker robots, disappeared and never returned. Mother now wants to completely destroy everything and start the world anew, seeing how sorry the state of the world has become. Her pre-programmed mission, however, completely prohibits her from doing so. Until, that is, she senses an organic human in the tower, Kohaku, and takes over her body. And yes, she was the only option. Remember that thing where Copen is a cyborg? No one else did either. Now that she's a human, her will isn't bent for some mission. She can do whatever she wants. This leads into the final boss, with the first phase being Mother in Kohaku's body, and the second phase being Mother's own body, with Kohaku inside. The first phase is fine. It's very reminiscent of Nova's first phase from Gunvolt 1. She flies around like him, and also like him has a shield you need to break, this time with an EX weapon, before being able to damage her. She also uses a lot of moves that are clearly referencing Gunvolt 2 special moves. I've heard about implications that there is actually like a really deep lore thing going on here with Lola and the timeline, and I'm not gonna get into that. This is a cool reference, and we'll leave it at that. The second phase, however, this is a slog. It's like one of my least favorite kind of boss designs ever, where you can only get in a little bit of damage to the main boss itself before having to deal with a different enemy before damaging the boss again, and rinse and repeat. It sucks ass, but once you do defeat her and save Kohaku, everything is cool. Mother's core, by the way, looks a hell of a lot like Lola, just like Ypsilon looks a hell of a lot like Copen, and they explain this through quantum entanglement. I hope they know that's not how that works. So, nothing really interesting with the Copen and Lola lookalikes, and they just use the teleporter and go home and end credits. Except, like I said, this is not the real ending. After Kohaku gets kidnapped, but before fighting Mother, the gang goes through this door leading to hard mode, which puts them back outside of the tower, which they then have to climb up again. Copen's suit is badly damaged, and is thus how they explain his limited functionality compared to normal mode, and the Ypsilon fights in this mode are replaced by not Ypsilon. After the last fight against him near the teleporter, still being powered by Null, RIP Bozo, not Ypsilon disappears and revives Null? And all the teleporter powers are transferred to Copen's Razor Wheel, how nice. After defeating Mother this time around, Null informs the gang of her newfound knowledge gained from being a sentient teleporter, that the teleporter actually has the power to travel to different worlds. Oh, and of course, since those abilities are now in Copen's Razor Wheel, that means he now has a weapon that can just travel across worlds at will, so they can go home. Null also speculates that interdimensional traversal is what the creator used to leave in the first place, and since the function was easily transferred to Copen's razor wheel, they conclude that the blaster rifle, yeah, remember that thing, which the razor wheel was made from, must also have similar capabilities. So, the creator himself must have been the one to originally give it to Copen. Okay, but it didn't do anything. The blaster rifle didn't do anything. We don't know who the creator is. We don't care about the creator. We don't care about anything they just said. The only relevant thing is that the razor wheel can allow them to go home. So can we get to that already? Cool. They go home, open up this portal, Null goes with them. That's the end of the game. Luminous Avenger X2, everybody. I don't know why this game exists. To be perfectly clear, if you like the story or any parts of this game that I don't, that's totally fine. These are my honest opinions, but I do feel bad when they're this negative because I don't want to rain on anyone's parade. People like video games for a lot of different reasons. One aspect of a game could be why one person loves it, while another person could not care whatsoever about that aspect and hate the game because of a different one. Maybe you don't care that X2 totally does its own thing and find the story of Mother and the creator and that whole world to be really compelling in and of itself. Maybe the changes made to Copen's gameplay suit your preferences better, or maybe you're just a sucker for saw blades. I want to stress this because I don't really like being a negative person and like to look for the positives in games because, I mean, why wouldn't you want to have fun? And there probably is fun to be had, going for stage scores and such like any other Gunvolt game. But for me, Luminous Avenger X2 overall is one of the most disappointing games I've played in a while. And the thing is, it's not even bad on its own. If this is the only Gunvolt game someone has played, I would actually be surprised if they didn't like it, because it does still have a lot of what makes the series great. It's just coming off the heels of far better entries, and in comparison to those, it is a massive downgrade for me. That's the disappointing part, and that's why I give it a lot of shit. A lot of what this game could do better, a lot of its glaring issues, are things that weren't problems at all in the previous entries. So I'm just left to wonder why, and be appalled at it. And after playing both Luminous Avenger games, I have to wonder why these were even made at all, because story-wise, they serve legitimately no purpose. Again, this is in the context of the overarching series. Gunvolt 2 left off with a great setup for an interesting continuation of Copen's story, so to have a game centered around him makes total sense. But they take a totally different direction than what's set up in Gunvolt 2 with Ix, putting it in an entirely different timeline and served up an okay story. I mean, if it actually stood on its own 2 feet, I would probably like it, but that's not really the case, in my opinion. And X2's story just... I mean, you watched the video, it's fucking X2. It has no bearing on anything, even within the Luminous Avenger continuity, literally being an isekai where they explore another world and come back. Why did they not just continue from Gunvolt 2? It makes no sense. And not to be pessimistic, but I have, against my will, heard things about Gunvolt 3 that make me really doubtful that it's gonna give me the satisfaction I seek. I'm still interested in what it does do though, so maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. Now, before I conclude, I do know this game has DLC, but they're mostly just extra bosses, which is awesome. I actually love boss fights, so normally I'd be all over that shit. But the pricing is pretty steep. Do you see this shit? And they're all crossover characters that I don't know at all, so I don't feel like it's worth it for me to pick these up, especially given my overall feelings about this game. So these will have to wait for a later time, or possibly never. On that note, there's also a DLC boss fight in X1 that I didn't know about until well after I was finished with it. Man, I really need to get into the habit of checking these things, so maybe I could do a video covering all these DLC fights in the future. That would be neat, because I would definitely be lying if I said I wasn't pretty curious about them. At any rate, that is Luminous Avenger X2. If you enjoyed the video, consider hitting the silly subscribe and like buttons and all that. It would be pretty awesome and appreciated. I also have some socials and our Discord server linked in the description. Thank you so much for watching, hope you stick around, and I will see you in my next endeavor. Peace.